morning. Mamukase. Thank you for coming to our end of year press conference. My name is Zimbabwean, and I'm the head of information publicity and Freezing Congress Party. And it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you the founding president of our party, Freezing Congress, Mr. Joseph Makamba-Pusha. He has invited us today to address us as we are approaching the end of 2018. Sorry for the late start, but we have started. So let me give the president the opportunity to address us.
Makadini enyu sanbunani linjani yaphila kakhulu. First one, I thank you for coming, and secondly, I think for me to wish you a happy Christmas. I know that's very difficult in these difficult times. But I thought it's important for us to remind each other that 2018 was supposedly to be a watershed year in the history of Zimbabwe, as the current government has been calling it the Second Republic. And also, what made this very important for us is that there is a budget that has been put together by the new Minister of Finance, and those are some of the things I want to talk about. The budget, privatization, some of the things he raised in the budget, the moving of the parliament, and executive expenditure. Those are the key issues I want to share with you. It is unfortunate, and I'm quite sorry, to many Zimbabweans that found themselves in 2017 December, in 2008, when we had no money in the country, people were still queuing for money in the banks. People were queuing for fuel on petrol stations, and people could not go to their holidays purely because of shortages. So if you were in Zimbabwe in 2008, and you come back in 2018, certainly there will be not any difference because the environment and the circumstances remain the same. We talk about a new dispensation when there's no change. A new dispensation is when you've got a new leadership, not change of positions. So our view is that, there is no change because Zimbabweans are still battling to get cash to be able to do their activities. And the 2% that was imposed by the Minister of Finance, and saying that this is a pro-poor action, when most people don't even have $15, I think for me is unacceptable. That also shows people who are not in touch with reality. People who fail to understand the basic living conditions of the majority, and people have been removed. But I think it's just really indication of a country and a president who have got new ideas at all, and who continues with the old way of doing things and calling it a new dispensation, which myself personally have never accepted that there's any new dispensation. If you're deputy president, you become president, there's no change. It's the same executive that was there. One of the key concerns I have, to show that the current government really does not care or have solutions for the country, is the movement of parliament. In the budget, Parliament is supposed to be moving from Harare, CBD, into Banket. Yet there are lots of priorities. Our hospitals have got no machines. Our hospitals have no medicines. And I believe that that is really insensitive to the issues that are facing the country. Moving Parliament to Banket does not change anything. They need to be able to optimize the use of land. We got the land so that we can do agriculture, we can do horticulture. But now if we are moving, we're not producing oil. It just means also we're gonna have more expenses going through there. Also, what caught our eye is FRISM is the executive expenditure. You have found that the executive expenditure presented by Professor Ngube is almost equal to the budget of higher education. That's again unacceptable. There is no progress or progression in terms of the things we want to do as a nation, and also to be able to inspire confidence that we're going to be doing a few things. So as a party, we're going to challenge through the Constitutional Court the movement of Parliament from the CBD to Banket, that we need to address things that are the first before we can do that. We're also going to challenge privatization, because I don't believe privatization is the solution. All the companies that are working in Africa from China, they are state-owned entities. And there's nothing wrong with a state-owned entity as long as that entity has got the right men and women to take it forward. So privatization is not a solution. The minister himself, Professor Ngube, ran Barbican, which was a private company, but he failed to run it. It ran into the ground. And again, would want him to be able to explain what happened when all those banks were taken down and he was running Barbican. Because I think there's a lot of that needs to be explained to Zimbabweans, to be able to say the men and women we trust with the public purse, the men and women we put in position of power and authority, actually have the capacity and have it in their hearts to find solutions for our country. So I believe that the privatization program must be consulted extensively, but with people with knowledge of how to run companies successfully. And the movement of the Parliament, I'm also believing that it must be put to a referendum, so that all of us, we can say, does it really make sense for us to prioritize that type of infrastructure which is not productive, yet we've got more problems in the country that are a priority. And for me in particular, health sector, water and sanitation infrastructure, and education, that should take priority, you know, in terms of what we want to do. There are also issues I believe that the executive and the president have not addressed fully, in terms of job creations and industries we're going to be able to create to move forward. And to make sure that I think Zimbabweans can go for Christmas hoping that next year there will be something new. We don't want to just talk about hope, because hope is not a strategy. But I think to be able to demonstrate you know, that these are the steps the government is taking to ensure that Zimbabweans get a fair deal in this country. The other thing I really thought, you know, it is important for me is corruption. When they got into government, I think one of the things that was repeatedly told to Zimbabweans is that, you know, they wanted to remove criminal activities within the executive. We haven't seen anyone. Now, when you talk about zero tolerance to corruption, you need to be able first to identify the corruption and nip it in the bud. I'm aware that there are few alleged arrests that have been done, but there are no details to the extent of the charges those people are facing. And we're not protecting anyone, but we're also not trying to preempt the course of the law and the processes in terms of it going forward. So we had some few ministers that have been taken for questioning, Mr. Chombo, Mr. Superman Dwanzira, and a few. But I'm not quite sure whether when they say that they're bringing corruption to zero or fighting corruption, whether those are the only people basically that have committed crime in Zimbabwe. But nonetheless, we want the details to be able to say, these are the charges that have been brought to these people. This is the extent of the corrupt activities they have done. And Zimbabweans themselves can be able to see how these ministers have been involved in illegal activities that have brought our country back to the crisis where we are. We also would want the president to clarify through reports in the medias and different sources that one of his business partners, Moti, is in jail in Germany. So can we get clarity to say, how can the president have a business partner that is in jail? And what are those circumstances if he can clarify? Because for us, I think it would be very important to make sure that our leaders are beyond any conflict of interest. Our leaders are clean. Our leaders lead by example. Our leaders instill confidence. I'm sure you, as fellow Zimbabweans, all of us, we are committed to see a better Zimbabwe, because we all don't want every Christmas to be the same. Our graduates will get out of universities without any prospects of finding a job. So as we go into the festive season and into 2019, I do hope that, the current government will certainly make it quite clear the steps they are going to take to fight corruption, but also to address the shortcomings. As a party, we have also called the repeal of ZIDERA. We think the United States of America should review and reverse ZIDERA. Imposition or the renewal of ZIDERA is against the spirit of what the American government say they want to do for the people of Zimbabwe. They say the ZIDERA is aimed to promoting democracy, to ensure that Zimbabweans participate fully in the economic activities of the country. But by reintroducing ZIDERA, we believe it has got negative effects to the majority of Zimbabweans, because then economic activities are stifled, and yet the executive, the few people in government, continue not to be affected by any consequences of ZIDERA. So we will be delivering a letter both to the people in government, that is the main opposition party in government, and ZANU-PF itself, that they do the right things to ensure that ZIDERA is repealed. We will also go to the American embassy, which we have written to make sure that they review ZIDERA. So that letter was delivered. We're looking forward to their response. And if we don't get the response, I'm sure we're going to invite you to work with us. We don't call it a march, to deliver the letter to the authorities of the United States of America to repeal ZIDERA for the benefit of Zimbabweans. The last thing I want to raise is that those in Parliament, those in government today, which is mainly MDC Alliance and ZANU-PF, put whatever selfish partisan ideas and programs they have for the benefit of our country. I think the last 20 years they've shown that they're bereft of any ideas. They need to be able to introduce new industries. They need to be able to show innovation. They need to be able to say, this is what we're doing for Zimbabweans, not for themselves. So I want to urge the leaders in opposition politics that, at some stage, we cannot defer the well-being, the recovery, the social, the economic development of the country for positions. I think I've said it before, that most of them, they've got nothing to offer to us as Zimbabweans. They're there to look after themselves and for their pockets only. Because if certainly they had things to offer, I believe that they would put forward policies and force the current governments to change their ways. The Reserve Bank transferred some of their loans to central government, but those loans belong to individuals. I would want the opposition in Parliament to raise those issues so that individuals do not borrow money from central bank or abuse their offices and then transfer the debt for future generations of Zimbabwe to pay. So we don't want that burden. We want to make sure that all of us, as Zimbabweans, we've got equal opportunities. We have the right to access to basic needs, water, sanitation, hospitals, and so on. To just show priorities that President Mnangagwa decides to charter a plane for Mai Mugabe to come, yet people don't have medicines. So those are the things I thought we want to say for next year. That's our program. The first one is to make sure that there's no construction of parliament in Banket or anywhere else in Zimbabwe, okay? But to put that money to hospitals and to use. We want to see the government, the executive expenditure reduced, and the privatization of state-owned entities. We want to see true professionals of integrity, men and women of integrity, run some of our corporates. We also want to see those who are corrupt to be punished, and the corruption charges to be fully laid out for all of us to have confidence that these are fair processes, and yes, indeed, these people have disadvantaged, prejudiced Zimbabweans with their corrupt activities. I also want actually an inquiry in NASA to find out some of the investments they've done, and in particular to businesses that are linked to politicians. I don't believe NASA's job is to fund businesses that could have conflict of interest, and all of us we know, or some of us we know, some of those investments. So I want to thank you certainly for coming, and wish you Merry Christmas. Unfortunately, I don't have the Father Christmas hats and the bond notes to be able to give each other presents, but it's in my heart, and I truly mean it. I wish you all the best with your families. Let's hope next year, the media is one of the most important institutions in the country to educate, to inform, and most importantly, to build the country. Because your education, your information, I think is very important to be able to guide us and to tell us things we don't know, so that we can all try and get the Zimbabwe winning. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the presentation. So at this point in time, I will take questions. If we do have questions, let's just raise our hands and ask the President anything we want to ask him. If we do have questions. Okay, let me start with you. So we'll take 3 questions at a time and the President will respond. Okay.
My name is Lucy Yassine, I'm a freelance journalist. You spoke of challenging the privatization of government entities. When should we expect the litigation process to start?
Okay. Leroy.
You mentioned
Can you just introduce yourself first? Thank you.
My name is Leroy from the you mentioned the impact of sanctions on general citizens of Zimbabwe. Have you as a party done some research to quantify the extent of the impact?
Okay. Thank you. Do we have another question? Blessing.
My question is,
Can you introduce yourself first?
Okay, my name is Blessing from Delhi. You mentioned a lot of plans that we have for next year. For example, challenging the construction of the new parliament. But what would be your message right now to the millions of Zimbabweans who are struggling to make ends meet?
Okay, let's give the President the opportunity to respond to those questions.
Thank you, Lucy. In terms of when do we start challenging the privatization, because I think, you can't just pick. I respect Professor Tulingwe, he's an academic, but certainly as a business person, he's a failed business person. And you can't just do wholesale privatization. I don't believe so. As I mentioned as an example, the companies that are doing business in Africa from China are state-owned entities. But how come they're doing well and they are running well? Okay? So for me, I think all these processes, we have our legal team looking at them. And certainly, as I said to you, in January, we're going to start that. We have given, I think, the government a good honeymoon period to be able to do the things they needed to do. It's 1 year since the old repressive regime of former President Mugabe is gone, but there's no change to the majority of Zimbabweans' lives. You go to the rural areas, you can't be admitted unless if you've got money and so on. So privatization, what I'm saying, is not the solution. The solution is to have, positive thinking, committed women and men in Zimbabwe who do not have any history of misappropriation of funds or doing wrong things. Leroy, in terms of the extent of the impact, it's quite clear, So the United States have put lots of laws or bills, for example, to say any country that trades with Iran, they won't do any business with them. The CEO of Huawei has been arrested for basically doing trade with Iran, all right? Okay. So you are aware that once the US puts you on sanctions, companies are discouraged from investing in those companies. Okay? So there would have been lots of investment and opportunities, and people who might have thought, here's a new dispensation, let's go back into Zimbabwe. But purely because they are scared, they would not freely come and invest or find partners to invest in Zimbabwe because of the global treaties and pacts and agreements that companies and governments have worldwide. So there's no currency. So there's shortage of currency, and the US dollar is one of the currencies we use in our baskets. And you know that we have no monetary policy control because we have our own currency. Okay, so you relying on other, kind of countries. If they tell you not to use their own currency, there's absolutely nothing you can do because you need an agreement to do that, right? Even moving into the RAN's common monetary area, we need the acceptance and permission of South Africa, and we need to apply to be part of that group. So the impact is huge. That's why there's no there's no liquidity. That's why there's no movement other than our own shortcomings as Zimbabweans, because we cannot find solutions. That really there's no inflow of investments. So don't be fooled by the headlines that so many billions have come, because if they've come, where's the job? Where are the industries? You know, the president talked about 15 billion that was lost in Marange, but he has not really told us where it went, and the minister was responsible then, Mr. Mpofu, Obed Mpofu, he has not accounted where the 15 billion went, and the president is not pressing on that to say, you know, this money could have been useful to Zimbabwe. My message to my fellow Zimbabweans, the millions who are struggling today, and I think just going to that, for me, as I said to you, my heart certainly breaks. There's no amount of message or encouragement, I believe, is sufficient to be able to lift anybody's hope. Okay. It is said, and I need to be realistic and truthful, that other than just wishing millions of Zimbabweans well, okay, there's absolutely nothing right now I could do. Okay. But I certainly wish that in 2023, we know that we cannot vote the same person who has failed us repeatedly and expect a change. You cannot play Chitekete and hope there's a new message. So ZANU-PF remains ZANU-PF, is self-centered. They did their part during the liberation struggle. Now it's time for people who understand economics. It's time for people who understand asset allocation to say, let's now move from here to there, right? Okay. So my view is that we're going to engage, myself as a leader of a political party, and thank you to those who voted for me. You are aware that other than MDC, if I join MDC-T, MDC Alliance and ZANU-PF, I came number 3, right? So I'm very grateful to those Zimbabweans who trusted me, and I promise you that we won't let you down. And I'll do the best. I'm not looking, you know, to look for money. I'm coming to work for you and for the generations to come, whereas the other guys have got something to hide. So my message to them is that they might drive safely wherever they are. They must stay together with their families. They must promote peace. And they must do the best they can under the circumstances we face ourselves.
Thank you.